I never thought a will reading could feel like a funeral, but that day it did. My ex-wife, Linda, had passed away 2 weeks earlier, leaving behind a fortune worth $34 million. We'd been divorced for over 15 years, and while our marriage ended bitterly, I still respected her. Our only son, Michael, however, made sure to remind me how little I supposedly meant to her. "Dad," he told me smugly the night before the will reading, "you're not getting a single dime. Mom made sure of that." He was her golden boy, the one she raised after our divorce, the one who blamed me for every argument, every tear, every bad memory. I didn't fight it. I let him hate me. Maybe I deserved it. The morning of the will reading, the sky was gray, the kind of dull color that makes even expensive suits look lifeless. The lawyer, Mr. Holden, an old man with thin glasses, motioned for everyone to sit. Michael was grinning already, sitting next to his fiancée, tapping his pen impatiently like he already knew the ending of the story. Mr. Holden began reading. "To my son, Michael, I leave the house in Connecticut, the cars, and $2 million in cash." Michael smiled wider. I could feel his eyes on me, watching for my reaction. I just nodded slightly, staring at the table. "To my sister, Margaret, I leave $500,000 and my jewelry collection." There were a few polite gasps, murmurs, typical family greed in the air. I sat there quietly, waiting for it all to be over. Then Mr. Holden turned a page, his voice slowing down. "And to my former husband, Daniel." I felt my chest tighten. Michael leaned forward, smirking. "Who stood by me even when I didn't deserve it, who helped me start my first business when no one believed in me, and who remained silent when he could have destroyed me." The room went still. "To my former husband, Daniel, I leave my company shares, valued at $14 million, as a gesture of gratitude for his kindness and silence." Michael's grin vanished. The air was heavy, like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. He turned toward the lawyer, stammering, "Wait, what? That can't be right." Mr. Holden looked at him calmly. "It's in her handwriting, Mr. Walker, dated 6 months ago." I sat back, stunned. I didn't smile right away, not until I saw Michael's face twist into disbelief. That's when I smiled, not because of the money, but because Linda, she remembered. She knew. What Michael never knew was the secret I kept for 15 years, the one that could have ruined his mother's life if I had ever spoken. And now, sitting there with that smile on my face, I realized Linda's last gift wasn't the money. It was the truth. Michael sat frozen in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. "This is insane," he muttered. "My mom hated him. She told me she never wanted to see him again." Mr. Holden adjusted his glasses, his voice calm but firm. "Apparently, she changed her mind before she passed. These documents were verified, notarized, and stored safely in her personal vault." The room fell silent again. I could feel every eye in that office turn toward me, measuring my reaction. I didn't say a word. I'd spent years learning to stay quiet while people painted their own versions of my life. When the lawyer closed the folder, Michael stood up abruptly, his chair screeching across the polished floor. "This can't be real," he snapped. "I'm calling my attorney." "You're welcome to," Mr. Holden replied softly, "but this will stands." I slowly rose from my chair and looked at Michael. He looked so much like Linda when he was angry, the same narrowed eyes, the same trembling jaw. "Michael," I said quietly, "your mother wasn't cruel. If she made this decision, there was a reason." He glared at me, his voice shaking. "Don't pretend you know her. You ruined her life." I didn't respond. There was no point in arguing with a man who only knew half the story. As I walked out of the office, the autumn wind hit me like a memory, cold but alive. For years I had carried the secret Linda had begged me to keep, and now
Her final act made me realize why she trusted me until the end. 15 years ago, before our marriage fell apart, Linda had made a mistake. She had been running her startup company, struggling to keep it alive, when she made a risky deal with an investor who turned out to be involved in money laundering. I discovered it accidentally, going through some old files for tax purposes. I confronted her and she broke down, terrified that she'd go to prison, that her reputation would be destroyed. I loved her then. Even though our marriage was dying, I still couldn't watch her fall apart. I went to the authorities myself, took the blame for a financial irregularity that technically wasn't mine. I lost my job, my reputation, and eventually my marriage. Linda walked away from me publicly, called me a liar, a manipulator, even a thief, because that was the only way to save her own name. Everyone believed her. Our friends stopped talking to me. My son refused to see me. I became the villain in everyone's story. But I stayed silent. I didn't tell a soul what she'd done. I worked odd jobs for years, rebuilding my life piece by piece, never asking for her forgiveness. And now, all these years later, she'd repaid that silence with something far greater than money. She'd repaid it with truth. I drove home that night without turning on the radio. The city lights blurred as I thought of her. Linda must have known she didn't have much time left. Cancer had taken her fast. Too fast for anyone to make peace. Maybe the will was her way of saying, "I remember what you did." When I got home, there was a letter waiting on my doorstep. My name was written in Linda's handwriting. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old photograph, the three of us together, smiling on Michael's 10th birthday. Her note read, "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means you finally heard the truth. I know I hurt you more than anyone, but you saved me when I didn't deserve saving. I left the shares to you because they were always meant to be yours. You built that company with me, even if the world forgot it. Take this as my apology and my thank you. Linda." I sat there for a long time, staring at her handwriting. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. The next morning, I went to the lawyer's office again to finalize the paperwork. Michael was already there, waiting. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie crooked, his anger barely contained. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" he spat. "You're just lucky she pitied you." I sighed. "Michael, you don't know what really happened between your mother and me." "I know enough," he said coldly. "She hated you." I hesitated. I'd promised Linda I'd never tell him the truth while she was alive, but she wasn't anymore. "Your mother made a mistake years ago, a mistake that could have ruined everything she built. I protected her." He laughed bitterly. "Protected her? That's your excuse now?" I reached into my coat and handed him the letter. "Read it." He looked at it for a moment, then snatched it away and began to read. His expression shifted slowly, from anger to confusion to something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. He finished and looked up at me. She wrote this?" I replied in her own hand. He sank into a chair, silent. For the first time, I saw him not as the angry young man who resented me, but as a son who just lost both parents in different ways. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "Because she asked me not to," I said. "She wanted to protect you from the truth. She didn't want you to see her as anything less than perfect." He rubbed his face, shaking his head. "I spent years hating you. And all this time—" He didn't finish. I walked toward the door, pausing before I left. "Michael," I said quietly, "money doesn't fix everything, but maybe it can start something new." I handed him an envelope. Inside were signed transfer papers, half of the shares Linda had left me. He looked stunned. "You're giving this to me?" I said. "You're still her son, and I'm still your father. Maybe it's time we stop pretending otherwise." For the first time in 20 years, he nodded. Just a small nod, but it meant everything. As I stepped outside into the sunlight, I finally understood Linda's smile in that old photograph. Life doesn't always give you second chances, but sometimes, if you stay silent long enough, The truth finds a way to speak for you.
Weeks passed after the will reading, yet the echoes of that day still haunted my mind. The money didn't feel real. $14 million sitting in an account that once seemed unreachable. But more than the money, it was the silence after the storm that I couldn't get used to. For years, I had been invisible, the man everyone whispered about but never spoke to. Now, suddenly, reporters wanted to know my side of the story. Investors called me Mr. Walker again, like I'd been reborn. But deep inside, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Every time I looked at the photograph Linda left behind, I wondered if this was really closure or just another chapter in a story that refused to end. One evening, Michael came by my house unexpectedly. He hadn't been there in over a decade. He stood on the porch awkwardly, holding a small box. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly. It took me a second to process that single word, Dad. "Come in," I replied softly. He sat on the couch, glancing around the modest living room. It wasn't much: old furniture, faded photos, books piled on the coffee table. "You still live here?" "Yeah," I smiled faintly. "Never needed much." He nodded, then placed the box on the table. "I found this while cleaning Mom's old office. Thought you should have it." I opened the box. Inside were old company documents, handwritten notes, and a small gold pen engraved with the letters D.W. and L.W., Daniel and Linda Walker. My throat tightened. "She kept this?" "She kept everything," he said. "There's more. I found some of her journals, too." He hesitated, then added, "She wrote about you. A lot." I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the notes. It was a business plan draft from 20 years ago, my handwriting all over it, red marks and comments. "You were part of everything," he said quietly. "Even after the divorce, she built everything on what you two started together." I looked at him, seeing something new in his eyes. Respect, maybe even guilt. "Michael," I said, "the past can't be rewritten, but we can decide what to do with it now." He leaned back, exhaling. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "I don't want Mom's company to die. She built something amazing, but it lost its purpose after she got sick. I want to bring it back, the right way this time. No secrets, no lies." I studied his face. The arrogance was gone. What I saw now was a young man carrying the weight of both parents' mistakes and trying to make it right. "You'll need help," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here. I want you to come back as a partner." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Michael," I said slowly, "are you sure about that?" He nodded. "You were there from the beginning. You believed in Mom when no one else did. You deserve to be part of her legacy." For the first time in years, I felt something warm stir inside me. Hope. Not the kind that dreams of money or success, but the kind that rebuilds bridges. "All right," I said finally. "Let's do it." That night, long after he left, I sat alone by the window, the city lights flickering like memories. I took out Linda's letter again and whispered, "You got what you wanted, Linda. He's back." Over the next few weeks, Michael and I started rebuilding the company. It wasn't easy. Some of Linda's old partners didn't trust me, some didn't trust him. But together we started small, restructuring, cutting away the corruption that had once poisoned it. Michael was relentless, but now his ambition had direction. I'd catch him sometimes reading Linda's old notebooks late at night, smiling softly like he was hearing her voice again. One afternoon during a board meeting, Michael paused mid-sentence. He looked at me across the table and said, "You know, Mom always said her biggest mistake wasn't the company, it was letting you go." The room went quiet.
I didn't respond, but my eyes met his, and in that silence, something healed between us. After the meeting, as we walked out into the sunlight, Michael turned to me. "Dad, why did you forgive her? After everything?" I smiled faintly. "Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting, son. It's about choosing peace over pain." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. That evening, we visited Linda's grave together. It was the first time we'd gone as father and son. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of lavender, her favorite. Michael placed a single white rose on her headstone and whispered, "We're okay now, Mom." I stood beside him, silent. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and crimson, and for a brief moment it felt like Linda was there, not in the ground but in the air around us, smiling. As we walked back to the car, Michael said, "You know, we could rename the company, make it something new, something that honors both of you." I looked at him curiously. "What did you have in mind?" He grinned. "Walker Industries, built on truth." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "That's a good name." He smiled back. "You'll handle the ethics and structure. I'll handle the growth and media. Deal?" "Deal," I said, shaking his hand. But deep down I knew this wasn't just a business deal. It was a new beginning. Still, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had one last secret left behind, something she hadn't told anyone. And as much as I wanted to move on, a quiet curiosity started to grow in my mind. A week later, while organizing Linda's old files, I found a sealed envelope hidden behind a painting in her office. My name was written on it again, but this time the ink was smudged, as if written in haste. My heart began to race as I carefully opened it. Inside was another letter and a key. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if the paper itself carried a weight of secrets. The key inside was small, golden, and old-fashioned, something you'd expect to open a jewelry box, not a vault. I sat there staring at it for minutes, the sound of the ticking clock in Linda's old office echoing in the background. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the letter. Linda's handwriting was rushed, but familiar, her words uneven, as if written in pain. "Daniel," it began, "if you found this, it means you're not done yet. There's something I never told anyone, not even Michael. I wanted to keep it buried forever, but you deserve to know the truth before it's too late. The key belongs to the lockbox in the basement of our old house in Connecticut. You remember the one, the house we bought before everything fell apart. Please, go there alone." My breath caught in my throat. Connecticut. The house had been sold years ago, but maybe the lockbox was still there, hidden somewhere. I folded the letter back carefully, staring at the key in my palm. Linda's words echoed in my mind. Before it's too late. What could she possibly mean? That night, I called Michael. "Son," I said, "I need to take a short trip. Just a few days." He frowned through the phone. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just something I need to check on." "Do you want me to come?" "No," I said quickly. "This one's mine." The next morning, I drove 6 hours straight to the old neighborhood in Connecticut. The house was still there, a little more worn, the paint chipped, but the same porch, the same crooked fence, the same oak tree where Michael used to play with his toy cars. A young couple lived there now, and after some explanation and a generous payment, they allowed me to look around the basement. The moment I stepped inside, the air hit me, cold, dusty, and heavy with memories. I could almost hear Linda's laughter from years ago, echoing faintly through the walls. I searched along the back corner where our old storage unit once stood, and there it was, half hidden behind wooden panels, a small iron compartment bolted into the wall. I inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, was another envelope and a small black notebook. My pulse quickened. I opened the envelope first. It was another letter from Linda. Daniel, if you're reading this, you've always been braver than I was. The truth is, the money laundering scandal 15 years ago wasn't just bad luck. The investor I worked with, his name was Carl Harris. You never met him, but he knew everything about us. He was dangerous, and when I tried to cut ties, he threatened to destroy both of us. I was terrified. You offered to take the blame, and I let you. But that didn't end it. Carl kept a file, documents, evidence, recordings that could ruin everything, even now. I spent years trying to get rid of it, but I could never find it all. What's inside this notebook might help you understand what really happened. My heart pounded as I opened the black notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, names, bank accounts, meeting places. Linda had been tracking something or someone long after our divorce. On the last page, written shakily, were the words, "If Carl is still alive, he'll come looking for this." A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back, scanning the dimly lit basement, suddenly aware of every creak and sound. Could this man still be alive? 15 years had passed, but the kind of people Linda described, men like Carl, didn't just disappear. I took the notebook and letters, locked the box again, and left. The drive back felt endless. Every headlight in the rearview mirror made my heart jump. When I finally reached home, I went straight to my desk and began reading every page of the notebook carefully. There were coded notes, contact names, and even a few old addresses. It wasn't just financial crime. It looked like something much bigger, possibly corporate espionage, even political bribery. Linda hadn't just been scared, she'd been hunted. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Why hadn't she told me sooner? Why wait until now? And what did she mean by before it's too late? My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was late, almost midnight. I froze. The knock came again, louder this time. Slowly, I walked toward the door. "Who is it?" No answer. I looked through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood outside, his face shadowed under a street lamp. He wasn't a neighbor. My heart began to race. I stepped back quietly, reaching for my phone. Before I could dial, a voice came through the door, calm and deliberate. "Mr. Walker, we need to talk. It's about Linda." My stomach dropped. How did he know her name? "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who's been looking for that notebook," he replied. I glanced toward my desk, where the notebook lay open. "I think you have something that doesn't belong." The voice was steady, but cold, too calm to be friendly. "Linda wanted it to keep it safe." There was a pause. Then he replied, "And she failed. Don't make the same mistake." A second later, the sound of footsteps faded down the driveway. I stayed frozen until silence returned. My hands were shaking when I finally closed the notebook and locked it in my safe. Whoever that man was, he knew Linda, knew about the notebook, and maybe even knew where I lived. I barely slept that night. By morning, I decided I needed help. I drove straight to Michael's office. He was surprised to see me. "Dad, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the notebook and the letters. "This," I said quietly, "is what your mother didn't want anyone to know." He flipped through a few pages, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Who's Carl Harris?" "The man your mother feared most," I said. Michael looked up. "You think he's still out there?" I nodded slowly. "And I think he knows we found this."
Michael's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the notebook again. "Dad, this is insane," he whispered. "There are names here, politicians, corporate donors, even a few bank executives. Mom was investigating all this?" I nodded slowly, my voice low. It seemed she wasn't just protecting herself, she was trying to take someone down. Michael leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "If this Carl Harris guy is still alive, he's not going to stop until he gets this back." I looked toward the office window, the sunlight catching on the glass.
That's why we have to find out what she was planning. There's a reason she left it to me and not to anyone else." Michael glanced up, his expression uncertain. "You think she wanted you to finish what she started?" "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe she wanted me to protect you from it." That afternoon, we sat together in silence, going through Linda's notebook line by line. There were coded entries, dates followed by initials, transaction amounts, and references to offshore accounts. One entry stood out. Meeting. H. Bridgeport, September 14th. Payment confirmed. Watch Daniel. I froze when I read that last part. Michael noticed my expression. "What does it mean?" I hesitated. "It means someone was following me. Back then. During the investigation? Maybe even after." The realization hit both of us at once. This wasn't just about old crimes. Someone had been keeping tabs on me for years. I felt a cold wave of fear crawl up my spine. "We need to be careful," I said. "No police, no media. Not yet." Michael frowned. "Dad, if this is as serious as it looks, we can't just sit on it." "We won't," I said. "But if Carl Harris really is alive, the moment we tell the authorities, he'll know, and then we lose any chance of staying ahead." Michael sighed, running his hand through his hair. "So what do we do?" I pointed to one of the addresses in the notebook. "We start here." That night, we drove to Bridgeport, a quiet industrial town that had long since lost its charm. The address led us to an old warehouse near the docks. It looked abandoned. Rusted doors, shattered windows, graffiti on the walls. But the fresh tire tracks outside told another story. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked. "No," I admitted, "but I'm done waiting for ghosts." We slipped inside through a side door, flashlights in hand. The air smelled of oil and dust. The floor was littered with papers and broken crates. In the far corner, I spotted something strange, a locked filing cabinet, bolted to the wall. "Help me with this," I whispered. Together, we pried it open with a metal bar. Inside were stacks of folders labeled with dates and initials, exactly like the ones in Linda's notebook. My pulse quickened. "This is it," I said. Michael pulled out one file and opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance shots of people exchanging envelopes, signatures, transaction receipts. But what made my blood run cold was the last photo. It was of me, standing outside my old office 15 years ago. The timestamp was the same week I took the blame for Linda's case. "Dad," Michael whispered, "they were watching you all along." Before I could respond, a sound echoed through the warehouse, the faint creak of a door opening. We froze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing on the concrete. I turned off the flashlight, motioning Michael to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, closer. A beam of light swept across the floor, and a voice called out, "Mr. Walker, I told you we needed to talk." It was the same calm, cold voice from the night before. My heart pounded. I could see the outline of a man holding a flashlight, moving between the crates. He wasn't alone. 2 others followed, their shadows shifting on the walls. "Run," I mouthed. Michael shook his head. "No, Dad! Now!" I whispered sharply. We ducked behind a row of old barrels and slipped through a side door into the alley. My pulse thundered in my ears as we sprinted toward the car. Behind us, voices shouted, "They're running!" We reached the car, slammed the doors shut, and sped away, tires screeching against the wet pavement. "Who are these people?" Michael gasped. "They're not just businessmen. They're cleaners. People who make problems disappear." We drove for nearly an hour before stopping at a small roadside diner. Both of us were shaking, breathing hard. "Dad," Michael said finally, "we can't do this alone. These people are professionals. That's why we need someone who knows how they work." I reached into my wallet and pulled out an old business card. The name printed on it was Detective Henry Cole, retired. He's an old friend from my insurance days. I helped him once with an internal fraud case. He owes me. Michael nodded, still catching his breath. What do we tell him? The truth, or as much as he needs to know. The next morning, we met Cole at a small coffee shop outside the city. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed with a quiet intensity that made people nervous. "Daniel Walker," he said, shaking my hand. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "I didn't either, but I need your help." We sat down, and I slid the notebook across the table. He flipped through it slowly, whistling under his breath. "You know what you've got here, right? This isn't just blackmail material. It's evidence of a criminal network that still operates today." "We figured as much," Michael said. He nodded grimly. "Carl Harris. Yeah, I've heard the name. He's alive. Changed his identity a few times. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Boston." "Then that's where we start," I said. "Hold on," Cole warned. "If you go after him, he'll see you coming. He's paranoid, dangerous. He doesn't just silence people, he erases them." I looked him in the eye. He already tried once. Cole studied me for a long moment, then said, "All right, I'll help you. But whatever's in that notebook, once we open that door, there's no closing it." I nodded slowly. "Then let's open it."
Michael's face turned red as he slammed his hand on the table. "This is a joke. There's no way Mom would give him $14 million. He didn't even talk to her for years." Mr. Holden remained calm, folding his glasses and setting them on the document. "The instructions are very clear, Michael. Your mother made this change 6 months ago, after she met with your father privately." Michael's head whipped toward me. "You met with her? Why?" His voice trembled between anger and confusion. I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding, but my face calm. "She called me," I said quietly. "She wanted to talk." Michael scoffed. "Talk? About what? About how she ruined your life? Or how you left us?" His words stung more than I wanted to admit, but I had learned long ago that anger didn't heal anything. Mr. Holden cleared his throat. "If I may, there's also a letter your mother asked to be read after the will, addressed to both of you." He opened a sealed envelope and began reading. Linda's voice came alive through his words. "Daniel, you were right. There are things I hid to protect myself, and things I should have confessed years ago. I know our son will hate me for this, but the truth must come out. You saved me once, from myself. You never took credit, never spoke of it, and that silence was worth more than all the money I made." Michael's expression turned from fury to confusion. "Saved her? What is she talking about?" Mr. Holden paused and handed me a second sealed letter. My name was written in Linda's looping handwriting. I took it slowly, my fingers trembling. "I'll read it privately," I said. But Michael snatched it from my hand before I could stop him. "No, if there's something I should know, I'm hearing it now." He tore it open and began reading aloud. "Michael, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I know you hate your father, but you never knew the full story. The company that made me rich wasn't built on my idea. It was his, your father's invention. I took it after the divorce and registered it in my name. He could have exposed me, ruined me legally, but he didn't. He said nothing for 15 years. Everything you have, every luxury you enjoyed, was built on his silence." Michael froze. His lips parted, but no words came. The entire room went quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Mr. Holden's voice softened. "There's more." He continued reading. "I gave your father what I owed him. I can't change the past, but I can make it right in death. Take care of him, Michael. He deserves peace." Michael dropped the letter, his hands shaking. He couldn't look at me. I felt something twist inside me. Pain, sadness, maybe even pity. "I never wanted to hurt you, son," I said softly. "Your mother and I, we made mistakes.
Both of us. He turned toward me, tears forming in his eyes. You let me hate you for years? You never told me. Because it wouldn't have changed anything, son. You loved your mother, and that was enough for me. For a moment, the silence in the room was almost unbearable. Then Michael stood abruptly. "This isn't over," he said, his voice trembling. "I need time." He stormed out, leaving the letter crumpled on the table. Mr. Holden looked at me with quiet respect. "You could have taken her to court all those years ago. Why didn't you?" I smiled faintly, staring at the door my son had just walked through. Because love doesn't always need revenge. Sometimes silence says more. But deep down I knew the story wasn't over. There was something else Linda hadn't written in that letter, something I'd kept buried even deeper, a truth that could still destroy everything if it came out. And now, with Michael angry and desperate, I feared it might.
That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter sat on my desk, half-folded, its edges trembling under the breeze from the open window. Linda's words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. "You saved me from myself." What did she mean exactly? There was more she hadn't said, and I knew it. But what kept me awake wasn't the money or the past, it was Michael. I could still see his face, pale and shaking, when he read that letter. My son had built his entire identity on hating me. Now his foundation was cracking. Around midnight, I heard a car pull up outside my house. My heart sank when I saw headlights flashing through the curtains. Michael. He didn't knock. He just barged in, holding a folder in his hand. "You're going to tell me everything," he said, his voice tight. "All of it." I sighed, motioning for him to sit, but he stayed standing. "What did Mom mean when she said you saved her? What did you cover up?" His words cut sharp, but I had no easy answer. "It's not something I ever wanted you to know," I said quietly. "It's better left buried." He threw the folder on the table. Inside were photocopies of old legal documents, business records, and a police report. My chest tightened when I saw the date. April 14th, 2008. "You see this?" he said, pointing at the report. "Mom was investigated for fraud, for falsifying patent records, but the case vanished. Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because I made it vanish." Michael's eyes widened. You what?" I took a deep breath. Linda wasn't a criminal. Not at first. She was desperate. The company she started, it wasn't supposed to be just hers or mine. It was supposed to be ours. But when we divorced, she panicked. She took the prototype and filed it under her name. When the patent office began questioning it, I stepped in. I told them it was hers, not mine. I destroyed the original drafts with my signature. He stared at me in disbelief. "You lied to protect her?" "Yes," I said, "because if she went to prison, you'd have lost your mother. I couldn't do that to you." He fell silent, his fists clenched. "You could have lost everything." "I did," I said softly. "My reputation, my business, even you." The room went quiet again, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Michael finally sat down, rubbing his face with both hands. "Why didn't she just tell me? Why let me hate you all this time?" "Because guilt doesn't always confess. It hides, sometimes even from itself." He leaned back, shaking his head. "I thought I knew her, but she lied to me. She lied to everyone." "She loved you, Michael. That was never a lie." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, walked to the window, and stared out into the darkness. "Do you think she really changed the will because she wanted to make peace?" "Maybe. Or maybe she knew something else was coming." Michael turned sharply. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "Before she died, she called me. She said she had found something from the old days. She wanted to meet, but before she could, she was gone." "Found what?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She said it was proof.
Of what? She didn't say. He looked down at the floor, his mind racing. You think her death was really an accident? The question hung heavy in the air. I hadn't dared ask it myself, not out loud. But now, hearing it from him, it felt like a door had just been opened, a dangerous one. I looked at my son, my voice low. Maybe it wasn't. He froze. Are you saying? I'm saying your mother had enemies, people who would do anything to keep their names out of the truth. Michael's eyes darkened. Then I'm going to find out who they are. Michael, no! But he was already moving, already determined. You protected her once, now it's my turn. He stormed out into the night, leaving the door swinging open behind him. I watched the taillights fade into the darkness, my heart pounding with fear. Because I knew something Michael didn't. The secret Linda hinted at wasn't just about business. It was about a man she once trusted, a man still alive, still powerful, and still willing to do anything to keep the past buried. And if Michael kept digging, he'd find him. And that could get him killed.
3 days passed. 3 long, silent days since Michael stormed out of my house. I tried calling him. No answer. His phone went straight to voicemail. The last message I left him was simple. Son, whatever you're doing, be careful. Some truths don't want to be found. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't listen. He was too much like me. Stubborn, proud, and driven by something that burned deeper than fear. The next evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a shaky voice whispered, Mr. Walker, this is Detective Harris from the Boston PD. We've found your son's car. My heart froze. Found it? Where? At an old industrial park off Route 7. But he's not here. I grabbed my coat and drove there myself, ignoring the speed limits, the rain, everything. The place was dark, empty warehouses scattered like ghosts of old dreams. Michael's car sat near a broken lamppost, door wide open, headlights still on. My chest felt like it was caving in. Michael! I shouted into the night. No answer. The detective met me halfway. We're searching the building, sir. The car's clean, no signs of struggle. Something wasn't right. I looked around, scanning the wet pavement, the shadows, until I noticed a faint light coming from one warehouse, number 14, the same number on the police report from 2008. My gut twisted. I ran toward it. Inside, a single bulb flickered over an old office desk, and sitting behind it was a face I hadn't seen in nearly 20 years, Richard Cole, Linda's former business partner. He looked older, heavier, but his cold smile was the same. Daniel Walker. Didn't think you'd ever come back here. I clenched my fists. Where's my son? He smirked. Relax. He's fine. For now. He came asking questions. About the patents, about Linda's files. You should have taught him when to stop digging. You had something to do with her death, didn't you? I said, my voice shaking with rage. He leaned back, amused. Linda got scared. She found out the truth, that the fraud wasn't hers alone. She was ready to expose me, so I made sure she never got the chance. You killed her, I said through my teeth. An accident, they called it. You made it look like one. And it worked, he said, grinning. But now your son has the files she left behind. He's clever, like you. If I don't get those files, he won't be breathing much longer. Before I could move, a sound echoed from the back of the warehouse, a chain clattering. Then a voice, Dad! Michael stepped out from behind a steel beam, his face bruised but defiant. I found the drive, Dad. Everything's on it. Proof of what he did. Richard's smile vanished. You shouldn't have come here, boy. He reached into his coat, pulling out a gun. Give me the drive. Everything happened in seconds. I lunged forward, grabbing a rusted metal bar from the floor, swinging it at Richard's hand. The gun went off, the sound exploding in my ears. Michael ducked, glass shattered, and the bullet hit the ceiling. I struck again, knocking the weapon away. Richard fell back, clutching his wrist, blood seeping between his fingers. Police sirens wailed outside. Detective Harris had followed me. Within moments, the warehouse was flooded with red and blue lights. Officers stormed in, shouting commands. Richard was dragged away screaming about lawyers and power and how none of this would stick. But it would. Michael handed the drive to the detective. "Everything's in here," he said, breathing hard. "Emails, bank records, contracts." He confessed to everything. Harris nodded. "We'll make sure it sticks." When it was over, I turned to Michael. His eyes were glassy, his face pale. He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You risked your life for her, and now for me." I smiled faintly. "I'd do it again." He hesitated, then stepped closer. For the first time in years, my son hugged me. It wasn't long, just a few seconds, but in those seconds, 15 years of silence melted away. Weeks later, the investigation confirmed everything. Linda's death hadn't been an accident, it had been staged. Richard Cole was convicted of conspiracy and second-degree murder. The shares were transferred to Michael and me jointly, per the will. I didn't care about the money anymore. I sold my portion, donated most of it to a scholarship in Linda's name. She had made terrible choices, but she wasn't evil. She was human, flawed, scared, trying to survive. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching the sun sink over the horizon, Michael came by. He handed me an envelope. He said, "From the lawyer." Inside was a note Linda had written but never sent. "Daniel, if this ever reaches you, know that I forgave myself because you forgave me first. I hope one day our son will understand that silence isn't weakness, it's love." I looked up, eyes misty. Michael smiled faintly. "I think I finally get it, Dad." We sat there in silence, father and son, as the sun dipped low and the world around us turned gold. For the first time in decades, peace didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like home.